actually
Now
better.
that's pretty good. Is that better?
Yeah, that's way better. Yeah, you're
Okay.
like, it's like way better. Okay. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to chat with you. I've been like looking forward to this conversation all week. And just like running through in my mind some of the things I'd love to like pick your brain about. But I guess we could do like a mini introduction if we want. I can go first. My name is Bethany. This is my YouTube channel. I just unlocked live on my channel. So this is the first live that I'm doing. So if there's any technical difficulties, we are gonna please bear with me. But yes, I am a doula and I love to post videos on my YouTube about comfort measures, pain management for labor, especially recipes for birth and pregnancy, and sometimes some plant medicine and ancestral um, traditions and cultural pieces that I like to share on my page as well. So I'm trying to share more on here, and I'm really excited to have Serene. Serene, would you like to kind of talk about what you do and what your role is right now in your community?
Yeah, so my name's Serene. I am currently a women's health and wellness coach and fitness trainer, but I am also a full spectrum doula. So I kind of walk between both worlds. Obviously, my niche is in women's health and wellness. So whether I'm doing personal training or fitness type things. I'm focusing on women's reproductive health and wellness. That's hormones, how you feel in your body, how your body functions, nutrition, and how women's bodies are just a little bit different when it comes to the fitness aspect and movement. Doesn't really matter what stage of life you're in. You could be, young girl, just hitting puberty, whether you're a young woman in your 20s, 30s, pregnancy, postpartum, coming back to movement, or of older age and hitting that menopause stage. So I work with women in all different areas of the spectrum. And yeah, so I'm super excited to be here and just talk about some of these different topics. I also like to dive very much into the plant medicines and herbalism and have a very holistic approach to whole human approach, is what I like to call it, to health and fitness, targeting mind, body, and spirit. So yeah, I'm super excited.
I love it. Yeah, I'm honestly so excited to ask you some of these questions that we kind of brainstormed beforehand. But since we're both doulas and we're very, very much into the spiritual and kind of meditative breath work kind of practices, I was wondering, would you like to start with like maybe one big diaphragmatic breath before we get started? And I can like take a look at, we can jump into really anything that we wanted to talk about. But yeah, would you like to take a deep breath with me?
Yes, of course. Okay, so
Okay.
do you want me to lead it?
Yeah, sure. Feel free to if you want to lead.
All right. Okay, let's take a big breath in through the nose, pushing that stomach out, and exhale. And let that stomach just sink back into place. That always feels so good.
Uh, Especially just like I feel like at the end of the week, things are getting into the weekend. It's just nice to like reset the body. I also worked out this morning, so I feel like my body's like it's been moving and I've been active, but it's nice to just like settle into where my
Mhm.
body is now being sedentary. So thank you for leading that.
Yeah.
Um, I saw you, so I wanted to ask you right away about birth control, actually, because I saw one of your posts this morning, like the beginning of it, but I didn't get to watch the whole thing. I think the topic was birth control and mood. I would love to like pick your brain about just thoughts on birth control, how it impacts like the womb and the body, and yeah, just like anything you might want to share about birth control and training and nutrition.
Yes, I love this topic because I'm so passionate about it and because I have a lot of my own personal experience with birth
Mhm.
control. I've had lots of close friends and family members that have had experiences with birth control. And so a lot of my knowledge and wisdom from that is a compilation of that, but also because I like to dive into any of the current research that's coming out on hormonal contraceptions or just contraceptive methods in general and the effectiveness of them. And one of the things about that I stated in my little video that I posted up the other day on Instagram is that there's not a whole lot of research in women's reproductive health and wellness. Um,
Mhm.
I'm not I'm blanking on the exact number of years, but as far as going in depth on some of the research of the types of medicines and contraceptives that that Western medicine has given to us, there's not a lot of studies done on how they actually impact our bodies, how they impact our brains, how they actually impact our hormones, and the kinds of side effects that actually has for us. Now,
Yeah.
the reason I'm so passionate about birth control is because I used to have a hormonal birth control. I had an IUD. I got it put in when I was 18 years old. So I really had only had a menstrual cycle for about 2 years, 3 years of my life. And but they were very painful. They were very heavy. I was a collegiate swimmer at the time, and I was competing all the time. So when I would be in competition and I had my menstrual cycle or I had my period, I would be running between the swimming pool and the bathrooms because I would just bleed right through, right through,
Oh,
a tampon in but less than an hour. So they were kind of getting to this point where they were in the way, and I didn't really know what to do. I didn't have a lot of education or knowledge around what some of the I kind of just had inklings, from your girlfriends of, oh, this one made me gain weight, this one um like didn't work for me, this one like made me really depressed. So I kind of like knew that there was that around, but I didn't have any solid evidence or education around birth control or hormonal contraception and what I was actually putting in my body. I just knew that I was going to put it in my body and it wasn't going to allow me to have babies and it would make my period stop. So and that's how it is for a lot of women. It's very much marketed that way into the world, that it's just there, put it in or take the pill or plug it up and then like you're good. But
yeah.
they forget to talk about the whole slew of other side effects that it can have. And so for me, 18 years old, I had an IUD. I bled for 6 months after that, straight, as it, adjusted to my body. And
Yeah.
that in itself was kind of horrible. But
Mhm.
afterwards, I didn't have a menstrual cycle after that, and I didn't really have any other issues. Other women have reported issues with IUDs, like having the IUD implant or go through their uterus. And so that I know is one problem that has risen up from it. But what
Mhm.
was actually happening to my physical body, having the IUD, and I didn't really connect the dots until much, much later, was I had I had a lot of issues with yeast infections, with BV. I
Mhm.
also had lost pretty much all of my libido and sex drive,
Mhm.
which is not, it was not, to me, I don't see that as a healthy thing. We're human. So I think having that lack of energy in your life, it can definitely be impactful. And I was definitely very depressed and anxious most of the time. I was anxious and depressed before, but I think that parts of that hormonal IUD definitely enhanced that a little bit for me.
Mhm.
Um, and then just kind of struggling with the different side effects from the infections to, um, just how my body was kind of feeling was very weird. And I didn't really know what to, I didn't really connect that that was the problem.
Mhm.
I just thought I was having yeast infections because, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But really, I did not get those issues until I had an IUD inside my
Mhm.
body. So, you know, uh, I was at school at the time. I came back home, um, started my journey in meditation, breath work, learning about my body, how my body moves, learning about more about nutrition and the effects of food and nutrition. And then, I share this very openly. I sit in sacred plant ceremonies and sit with the plants. And in my very first ceremony, uh, it was shown to me, and I could feel, because I still had my birth control in at the time. I could really feel it in my body. And I was like, oh my gosh, my womb, my body is so inflamed. It's like it hurts. Like I feel like my body just wants to push it out, like get this thing out of me. And I think within a month after that, I scheduled an appointment to the OBGYN. I just had them take it out. And
Yeah.
after that, I was really worried, concerned that my cycle was going to be really heavy again, that I was going to have a lot of issues. But up
Mhm.
until within that year of coming home and having that ceremony, I had done a lot of healing and work around sexual trauma. And I'm a very big believer that a lot of illnesses, heavy bleeding, endometriosis, PCOS, different ovarian and uterine cancers have a lot to do with how we as women store our emotions. Our bodies keep the score. So uh, I think that my own personal journey with that, the heaviness of my cycle, the pain that I would have, the
Mhm.
depression, the anxiety, very much had to do with that trauma. And having taken my birth control out, my cycle actually went back to almost a very normal cycle. Now, the other half of birth controls that they don't talk about and people don't realize is that if you're on a hormonal birth control, you're going to have a crash as soon as you take that birth control out. And so, because I had a progesterone only hormonal birth control, when I took that birth control out, my body didn't have any of its own progesterone. And so I was just running straight on estrogen and I thought I was going crazy. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm losing it right now." And I got very suicidal. I was very depressed, again, very anxious, and things that I had already felt that I had worked through quite a bit came rushing right back, all because I took that little thing out of that part of my body, and it's a very intimate part of our bodies, right? And so, to really feel all of that emotionally, but also like feeling that my body was just trying to come back to a baseline was really eye opening. I did a lot of it was then that I started to really get into how does food actually help me if I don't have any of this hormone, what do I need to eat so that this comes back like in a good way. And it took about a month and a half for me to really feel like normal again. Um, but that's where I really went into the food. I was like, wow, I had an eating disorder before, but I became, had since worked through healing some of that and really got into how food is actually a healing property for our bodies. And it's supposed to support our hormones and support our functions. And so that's where, I really dove into food and made that a part of my process of healing. Um, yeah, so that's my story, but also my take on birth control and why I made that video and have that view is because the side effects of birth controls, especially hormonal ones, do have emotional side effects. And if you already have depression or anxiety, or you feel that you don't have a lot of emotional regulation to some emotions, the birth
Mhm.
control doesn't make them go away, right? The birth control doesn't take the root problem away. It just maybe for some people it might numb it, which I think for me it was definitely a big numbing agent.
Okay.
But for others, even in the study that I posted on my Instagram yesterday, most women report that it makes their symptoms worse or that they have mood swing side effects. And
Yeah.
so some don't. Some women say, "Oh, it didn't. I don't feel like it changed anything." But a, a very big majority do report that. And so it's really hard with some of these studies when it comes to the emotions and like mood part. But that's such a big part of who we are as humans because most often emotions and how we're feeling is like it's how it's verbally communicated, right, to these researchers or in these studies, or, they might tally down how somebody's feeling. You can't really measure emotions with, uh, like a measuring tape or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my take on it. I love to talk about it just because of my experience and my own
Mhm.
healing. experience that I had and how that played a part, and really how it was covering up some of these deeper, issues and trauma that I had. And I feel that it is that way for many women, but it's a different conversation to bring to the table when we're talking about, you know, deep seated traumas and how that's actually playing out in your body. And then,
Yeah.
we add in a birth control and then it just makes it worse. So,
Yeah. I mean, I love that you are bringing awareness to this because I feel like it's really not talked about enough. And like you said, I think it's such a good point that emotions are they're not objective. Like in a lot of
mhm,
ways we can't really we can, try and measure, but it's just like spiritually, I feel like so many women may feel like they yeah, like you said, like they're going crazy or like something's wrong and they have no idea why, and they may be on birth control, and that may be the reason. And it is interesting to the idea of how it impacts people differently. Yet, some people may not know that it's contributing at all. So, bringing awareness to it can really be super powerful for people because at least they know, like,
mhm,
that's something that they could try. Like, whereas they may have not even thought that that was doing anything because maybe it was an IUD and they had it placed, X amount of years ago and they forgot about it and they didn't realize like how interconnected the womb space and the body is, and things that may have been happening and accumulating over the years. And I find it just like really, really unfortunate that especially a lot of our youth have a similar story. And I will say, speaking to your point of the IUD being placed at a young age, I also had an IUD. I had the copper one at I think it was either 19 or 20. So I was in my first relationship and I was like, this is the most effective, won't have to worry about it. I'm a college student, like I have a lot of things on my plate. So let me go ahead and just get that. It's non-hormonal, like it'll probably not be I won't be, as you know, any symptoms from it, but it was extremely painful. I know that there's like that bump or hurdle that a lot of providers say you just kind of have to get over those first 2 to 3 months, or however many months until then your body kind of acclimates and like gets used to it. But at the end of the day, it's still a foreign object in the body,
mhm,
and by no means do I want to say that I don't think it's, the right choice for anybody because, of course, like we're really big on body autonomy. But we can really speak from, I feel like, our experience of just like how this impact, especially having previous mental health concerns and how that impacted. Having the birth control with those previous concerns being exacerbated or just like coming off of it, especially. I think for me, it was like I was I had started the pill and then I didn't like that at all. I had the same experience where I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like, I feel so weird. Like, this is not normal. Like, I would literally, like, before I had a lot of anxiety already. But when I started taking the pill, I remember there's a time where I was sitting on the college bus, like going in between classes or something. I can't remember, maybe getting groceries. And I started feeling so fearful for no reason. Like, there was no like situation happening. I just started getting extremely anxious. I was like actually I started crying on the bus and I had no idea what was happening. And I think about it now and I'm like, I really feel like that's what it was for me, just how my body was responding personally. And I was watching a podcast, I think.
oh, frozen.
We're back. Sorry, someone called me. I'm gonna turn on my do not disturb off. Here we go with this. I was watching a podcast and she was saying the same thing that you're saying of how like there's really not a lot of studies at all on how birth control impacts the body. And then also some studies, the very little that we have show that it actually increases our perception of fear. And in young developing brains we have no idea like if they're able to kind of readjust after those developmental changes are taking place with birth control. And I thought that was very concerning to hear in the podcast because we kind of know that people who have a fully developed brain, are into adulthood who take birth control can come off and then eventually like kind of find back their equilibrium. But what the person in the podcast was saying, I forgot her name, but she was like a really well-known like fitness college and athlete, like female trainer on the Andrew Huberman podcast. And yeah, she was saying it increases your like just perception of fear, and especially in youth they feel more like they feel just more anxious and fearful about doing things, and then they'll come off of it and they'll be like, I don't know why I didn't think that I could do that. That's like not wasn't that like scary of a thing to do, but while they were on it they just felt extremely like fearful. And I think that was honestly the case for me because I feel like it just really made me feel like super like hyper and super like aware, overly aware and sensitive to things. And so that's why I wanted to try the copper IUD. I was like, non-hormonal, we'll be good. It was not the case for me. It was just so painful. I had heavier like menstrual cycles before I had the copper IUD, but then once I got it, and then they say it's normal, within the first 2 to 3 months, and maybe that is the case for some people's bodies. But I can say for mine, it felt not normal to the point where like I couldn't even stand. I was working at a grocery store at the time, and I had to take an Advil every couple hours just to get through my shift because of how heavy the cramps and the bleeding were. I was just like in a fetal position when I got home, and I was like, this can't be normal. Like, I just don't think that I should put my body through more than it needs to for this sake. So that was my first introduction to birth control. And they told me the same things that they told you of like basically you put it in, forget about it, or your body will just like get used to it after a certain time and we're good. And I feel like it's just the case for so many youth that they either start the pill at a very young age before their body is really like fully developed, or they may not have other be aware of other tools that are available for them, like nutrition or movement, meditation, and other healing modalities that I wish I surely knew about, especially when I was in college. And when you're in college, you just like you have classes, you might have multiple jobs, relationships, friendships, social life. If you're an athlete, it's just you don't. I feel like college is like such a integral time, or just even if someone's not in college, even they're just getting into teenage years where they're starting to have kind of that menstrual cycle come up, and it's like a time where people just like treat their bodies like with the maximum amount of like stress, and don't have time to really like take care of themselves. So
You're pounding your body in college. You're drinking, you're having
yeah,
fun, you're staying up till 3 a.m. Like it's all
yeah, exactly. Like, that's like such an important time when the body is like just figuring out like these habits. And I'm glad that I've learned now like a lot of the things that I know, but I think about what I was eating, how I was treating my body, just yeah, being on the pill or having different like things in my womb space going on and not healing a lot of those emotional wounds, just numbing it and junk food and just whatever could give me energy to get that final done. That was a rough time. But it comes back. Like it comes back in the later years. Those habits, we start to develop them, and I think that the energy levels and just your self esteem and all these different things, it can start to like add up over the years. And I think it's the same with birth control and just womb health too. Because I think the interesting thing about the womb for me is that I feel like there's so many wounds and traumas and just what we eat and a lot of different like external factors that we don't really like realize until maybe it gets to the point where we're having like some very painful issues or challenges that are affecting us on a daily basis, and that's like when we tend to address it a lot. And also I think that's just the model of healthcare that we have in this country is unless you are in an extremely urgent or emergent situation, you're going to be gaslighted more often than not, especially if you identify as a woman, because women, this has been trends for hundreds of years where we're just called crazy or manic or, even witches because we, And then we're gaslit into like, oh, we'll just take this, it will make everything go away. And I think it's just a lot of band-aid fixes for some really, really like deep ancestral wounds that our Western providers, I respect our medical professionals and we need them, but I just think that it's very unfortunate that a lot of youth, especially in our marginalized communities and BIPOC communities, um, that are just told like, you're making it up or this is not real, just do this and it'll be fine. And so we just put it on the back burner. We're like, okay, well, I have all these other things I need to deal with, so let me not worry about it, can only do one thing at a time. But I feel like it really does over the years. It starts to get to that point where it keeps building up. And I think in the womb space, I agree with you. I do think that that can contribute greatly to developing things such as like cysts, and endometriosis, both of which I've dealt with. And I think it just seems like it's so unfortunate, that it has to get to that point for us to be taken seriously, or where there's so much damage that happens within the body, that it becomes a long healing process. And it definitely is. It can be such a healing journey and a spiritual like experience, but I think it's unfortunate that yeah, it has to kind of be like on this weird spectrum where it has to get so bad for us to be taken seriously in healthcare, especially as women. And as a doula, I could definitely talk about a lot of these things as well. And I'm sure you've seen like in your doula work of just, yeah, how can we start to reclaim that autonomy and the confidence to speak up for these things that are happening. And I think there's a lot that we can share, and I'd love to ask you about of like how do you get in tune with your body so that you can start to take yourself and your experiences seriously and be able to start to vocalize that and do something about it. Because I think it just gets to the point where we have mental health challenges, we have nutrition challenges, access to that nourishment that's really going to help our body, and time, and the ability to work out and prioritize moving. Yeah, I think there's like so many different avenues that we could like take the conversation, but I would love to know what was your approach of when you started to have those issues or realize like that you wanted to make that change, especially with the mental health aspect. It got to that point where it was just like, I literally have no choice. What was kind of your approach? Like, what did you do to start to kind of get back into your body? I know you mentioned like the ceremony. Maybe you could talk a little bit more of like how can someone who watches this like approach it or try to like enter into that journey for themselves of trying to take back their autonomy and reclaim their womb health.
Yeah. So I there's so many points in that of everything you just said. I'm like, oh, I want to talk on that, or I want to talk on that.
Yeah.
But
If
um,
you're
one of the parts that I'll kind of rewind back to is how you're talking about how the birth control would enhance our perception of fear that doctor was
yeah,
saying. And I think I still have to listen to that podcast. I'm like, ended up listening to another one and I'm like, okay, I gotta listen to that
we
one.
talk. I
But I know
couple.
I'll sit down and listen to that one and like take a bunch of notes and stuff. But um, I find that very fascinating, right? Because she's saying that coming from a standpoint of science, where it's like, hey, when we put this birth control in our body, the way that it binds to your hormones, it's causing women to have this greater perception of fear. I find that really fascinating because for women, and I would say men as well, for men, it's more like the stomach and their prostate area because men have intuition too. But women's intuition lives in the womb space, right? And intuition is your inner knowing, it's your gut instinct, right? So I find it really fascinating that she said that there's a heightened perception of fear because for us to be safe, we have to be able to listen to our intuition. We have to be able to listen to our inner knowing, right? That's when you're in danger, that's that gut feeling of, hey, this situation, this person, this event, this thing that's happening right now isn't safe, right? So that sends us into our fight or flight mode, right? Our gut, right? Even in nutrition, they say the gut is the second brain. It's like our gut speaks to our brain, right? So we have that intuitive knowing, that inner knowing that something isn't right or something's off. or, our inner knowing that something is good or something is right. It helps us to have some form of discernment, right, before we make a decision.
Mhm.
uh, and so one thing that I've found, right, is or that kind of this is just me processing and thinking on that, right, is that when we're taking a birth control, right, especially if it's an IUD or a ring, right, where you have to insert and it actually goes into that space, you're you're actively putting something into that intuition. Could be a block, but there's something there that's bothersome to our bodies, that it's like, hey, look at
Ah,
me, why aren't you
yep.
paying attention to me? Like, I'm right here, I'm in here. There's a
Yeah.
foreign object in here. Like, what are you doing?
Ooh,
And even copper IUDs, right? Like, they're non-hormonal, but copper is toxic to our uterine lining. So that's how, we don't get pregnant when you have a copper IUD. So you're
mhm.
creating a toxic environment, right, in the uterus that probably does not feel very good to our bodies. Now, if we are disconnected, right, we're disassociated, we're not actually in our bodies, it's really hard to actually feel those things, right? It's really hard to actually make the uh, connection that this thing is the cause of some of my issues, or this thing is the cause of some of the emotional mood swings I'm having. This thing is the cause of my yeast infections. Uh, and so when we're coming back into the body, right, it's a coming back into your intuition, right? That's coming back into the womb. Coming back into the body is coming back into your intuition, and you have to start at the root. And so, for me, when I first came home from, college, COVID was happening. I
Yep.
stopped swimming, and I was just here. I met my current business partner, and um, I was studying kinesiology. So I was studying human anatomy. I did a lot of studying of anatomy. I did a lot of studying of the human body and movement, but I was never myself actually connected or in my body. Now I have, previous traumatic experiences, and as many people do, but a huge part of trauma is you go into a fight or flight and then you don't come back. Your body stays in that fight or flight mode. And
Yeah.
so, um, my very first approach to healing, right, to getting back into my body, was movement. It was exercise. I'd swam most of my life. I've always been in a pool, but doing things on the land was a little bit not my strong suit. But I started, I was training as an athlete, and I started to really just like take workouts seriously. And I had so many things going on mentally and emotionally. Like, I could just name the list: eating disorders, exercise addiction,
Mhm.
depression, the anxiety. I had my unresolved trauma, and they
Mhm.
were all compounding into the fact that I had very poor mental health. I had very poor self-esteem. I had very poor body image, very poor self-love. Didn't have an ounce of my own self-worth, the value of my self-worth. And there's so many layers and layers and layers underneath those things. But moving, exercising my body in a different and healthier way was the start, right? And exercise and fitness is a very scary thing in today's world, because everyone thinks that you have to look a certain way or you have to be at a certain standard before you start. That's not what it's about. Exercise and fitness for your actual health and well-being is just being able to move your body in a way that feels good and that promotes health and wellness for you, right? So if you're someone that is on a weight loss journey or you need to lose weight, it's like, well, start moving, right? Find a coach, find a trainer, do something that feels good for you to just get you going and starting, right? And that's getting into your body. The other parts were meditation and breath work. So, I'm a huge now I just push meditation and breath work towards everyone. I'm like, go do it. The world needs it. Everyone's stressed. Everyone's like running at 1,000 miles an hour. Go freaking take some breaths or something. But
Immediate.
yeah. And so, even a lot of people think about meditation and breath work as this really big woo woo thing, right? Oh, all
Yeah.
the love and light gurus are doing meditation and breath work. And it's definitely out there. But for me personally, and for what I teach at the gym that I train through, is OPT Beyond Fitness. Shout out. Is that it's not that's not what meditation and breathwork is about, right? It doesn't have to be about anything more than getting in tune with your body, getting in tune with your emotions, getting in tune with the types of thoughts that you're having. A lot of times people think that meditation is clear the mind, don't think about anything, but
Mhm.
that's not what it is at all. When you meditate, it should actually be the deepest form of self contemplation. It should actually be you let all the thoughts and all the emotions come through so that you can actually discern them and understand where they're coming from in yourself, right? And some
Right.
of those places are scary. Some people don't want to look at those parts of themselves. For me, when I started my practice and I started breathing, I was very tense. I was very stiff. I didn't want to breathe into my stomach because that area, right, that stomach, that womb area is a very uncomfortable place for me, right? I'd
Mhm.
always struggled with body image. I'd always struggled with loving that part of my body. Uh, and, I on top of that, I have trauma, right? And so getting into that part of my body was very uncomfortable, it was very new, but it was the start to me understanding, wow, I am so tense. I am so stressed. I can't relax. My body hurts and my body is in pain. And
Mhm.
so that ticked off me exercising differently. That ticked off me eating differently. That ticked
Mhm.
off me starting to think about why my body hurts, why I'm uncomfortable, and how that actually feels, right? That's getting into the body. It's like all these different, it's the mental, it's the emotional, it's how these things feel for you. Do they feel good? Do they feel bad? Are you in pain? And those are questions that people don't typically ask themselves in their day to day, right? Even now, like
Yeah.
I'm 4 years on this journey, and even now when I'm exercising, I'm like, oh, my knees hurt. Like, got to do something different. I'm not gonna keep pushing the thing that hurts more. And so the fitness, the meditation, the breath work, the food were all big parts of me getting into my body. Journaling, asking myself deeper questions, right? Meditation is all about asking yourself these questions. When I teach meditation, I typically have a question or like a prompt or two that I ask people, right? That ends up being the theme of the meditation because there are areas of our lives that we want to actually like grow in and we want to think about. And man, am I being stubborn here? Am I sad? Am I feeling uh do I am I having too much lack of self-worth in one area? How is that affecting my whole life? Career, relationships, uh like how I my self-perception, how I'm living my life, my hobbies. And these are all things that compile into mental health, right? Mental health is the quality of the life that you're living, right? And the perception that you have of that life. When we have a low quality of life or we're not living a life that, or we have a life that is filled with a lot of suffering, we can assume that it brings our life down, right? It brings, uh, we have more of those down emotions where it's like, man, like I'm depressed every day, I'm anxious every day, I'm stressed every day, I don't really have a lot of vitality in my life. But I always, 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 no matter what, bring it back to getting into the body, bring it back to fitness, the meditation, the breath work, nutrition, um, and then just continuing on the growth trajectory, right? Taking courses. As far as ceremony work, that kind of just came into my life. It just walked its way in. And the way that I look at ceremony work, right? Because I call it ceremony work. I call, sitting with the plant medicines because they are medicine for a reason. I like to have those conversations about psychedelics because a lot of times people think that they're labeled as a drug, but there's that's a whole world, and that's a whole other conversation. But, for me, it was medicine and healing for my body. Meditation and breath work and the rhythm of fitness helped me to understand the experiences that I was having with the plant medicines. So, having connected to my stomach and my womb prior to sitting with a plant medicine, prior to sitting in a sacred ceremony, I had this understanding already that, you know, oh, I have very deep body image issues. I have like unresolved sexual trauma that I'm working through, right? I became aware of it before and I was like, now I'm going to work through it because this has a lot to do with my self worth and my self love and my ability to feel safe in my body.
Mhm.
And so that all had to happen though first through those initial 3 4 things. And
Yeah.
without having the fitness, without having the movement, without having the meditation and the breathing, without having the nutrition, without having the deeper discernment and contemplation and personal growth trajectory, I wouldn't have had the understanding of the experience that I had my very first time without those things, right?
Yeah.
So I learned that I needed to feel my body, and then I went to ceremony, and I was like, I feel my body, and this birth control don't feel good, so I'm gonna take it out.
I love that. Powerful. That's so powerful because yeah, there's so many beautiful things that you just said that like bring up so many thoughts for me. Um I think like when I'm hearing you speak, it's like so healing for me to hear you talk about and verbalize your experience because yeah, it's like I can really resonate with a lot of what you're saying of being able to create the space so that you can then recognize and then create a growth trajectory was the words that you use. I think what I love about that is when we talk about mental health, it can be so challenging to just like to make any action towards improving one situation because it's so connected and it's so overwhelming when it comes to mental health. Um, Making a goal can be something that triggers someone to relapse into a either an eating disorder or a negative habit that is harmful for them. So I think it's such a subtle and nuanced conversation. I love that you have like talked about it from the holistic stance because I feel like my approach to my mental health over the years, I'm just shifting now, honestly, in the past year from that kind of let me do XYZ thing and then like we're good. Because I realized this is just from my own experience that it doesn't work when I put these like very specific boxes on myself and I don't approach it from like the growth perspective because it is spiritually and just emotionally, physically, it's always going to be the journey of working towards the best that way that we know how to do it wherever we're at in our life throughout whatever season. And I feel like the plant medicine is such a beautiful reminder of that. um, we have seasons for a reason, and not everything is supposed to be a monolith and the same and exactly how we might think in our logical thinking analytical mind. And I feel like a lot of ancestral knowledge teaches us to get back into the body, go back to the basics, like you said, of that nourishment and the movement and connecting with nature, and spiritually creating that liminal space within us to where we can, even if it is extremely painful and hard to do so, we can have somewhat of a clear vision of what exactly is it that's going on. Because in mental health, I think it's so easy to feel like, yeah, like you're just not thinking clearly. I guess I'll just speak for myself. Like when I was having so many mental health challenges, and I still, mental health is something I have to maintain and really like make sure I'm good about today because it is that journey of healing those wounds and just a lot of ancestral, things that come up. But what I think for me is like been helpful is to try and shift the perspective that I'm going to be at one place where I'm quote unquote good with my mental health forever, and I will not have to, like, I'll have all my systems down to the point where I'm like everything is good and I'm ready to go no matter what happens. And I think that that's a very Western colonized mindset, because Western medicine, if we look at it, what it tries to do is it approaches a problem, it gives you a solution to what seems like a very acute, like specific problem. And they look at it from that lens, and that's what they're trained to do. And we do need that in a lot of instances. If someone breaks their arm, we need a doctor to help them keep that arm stabilized from getting further injured. However, when we look at like what people are dealing with today, especially when it comes to chronic illness and mental health, the approach is not going to work when we try and put people into a box. That's just gaslighting them. We say that, okay, you're telling me that you have all these interconnected issues. You have, joint pains and headaches and anxiety and, digestive issues and, all these different things. They're like, well, just take this pill or just eat more fiber, or, it'll be a very prescriptive approach. And I think it's just really, it's not helpful in a lot of ways for especially when we talk about the womb, because things that happened 5 years ago can be impacting how we feel today, and the things that we deal with, and the challenges we have in the womb space. And when we talk about pregnancy, that's why for a lot of people it can bring up those wounds and those past traumas, because it's kind of like a reminder, like, wow, like there's a life growing from within me that I'm protecting, but so much has happened in that womb space, around that womb space, and in the body previously. And so that's why like it's so important that we really support people through that journey and through on out postpartum. But I think it's, yeah, the approach that you're talking about is really like hitting for me, because it's talking about creating space to the point where you can have a just a clear picture of all these different things that may have impacted the way you're feeling. And it's not necessarily trying to like absolve those immediately or just like take them out of the picture. Because for me, I've also dealt with exercise addiction. When I got out of my first relationship, I went full force into fitness. I became a yoga instructor. I was teaching for the past, basically since COVID until now, and was doing long distance running. Like I was running like basically marathons, and I definitely got a lot of injuries from that because I wasn't doing it in a way that was connected. I was connected to my body, getting the proper nutrients and rest and recovery and all these things. Um, but I look back on those experiences, and it has taught me a lot of like how I want to approach things going forward. But I think that's been like a major shift for me, and it sounds like from what I'm hearing with your journey too, is it's not necessarily we can do um, exact recipe for what's going to just solve, like you said with meditation, it's not going to just like clear all your problems from your mind. It's actually like what practices, rituals, habits, movement, and nourishment that suits our specific body and our genetics, that helps to create more space to see things clear for what we do on a daily basis, and then a growth trajectory of understanding that like this is a learning process. What worked for me then may not work now, may not work in the future. And that's really powerful because it's reclaiming your ability to create space within your own body without the need of maybe external pieces of like advice from medical providers or other people and what you see in social media to tell you how your body needs to be, how you need to look, and the emphasis of like really how do we feel is so important. But it's hard when you've been so disconnected for years and years and years, and that's why, like personally, I have a lot of injuries from when I trained for a marathon, even though I was like so like my analytical mind was like, I planned out all these trainings, I took a year and I did everything spaced. But truly, like when I look back at that, like I definitely had exercise addiction, and I do think it was an eating disorder because I was extremely underweight. Even when you're running long distances, like I'm talking 10, 20 miles, like yes, you're gonna get lean, but there's so many things that should go into that, especially as a female athlete, to help with the recovery because of how
Mhm.
much stress is on the body and how much damage that can cause. So, I mean, I'm learning these things now, but I think that yeah, it's something I'm still healing through of just like looking back on all the things I wish I knew. And I think when we talk about the growth trajectory, it's definitely a very healing conversation. When we talk about ancestral wisdom, which I feel like so many of our ancestors, that's what they did on the daily basis. And it wasn't something that they had to put on a to do list or that they thought was like, a calendar marking. Like there's ceremonial things and seasonal things, but it was like a natural way of being for them to be in tune with their body and to support one another in doing so. And I feel like getting back to like that community and these sort of conversations are super helpful of just trying to encourage people that even if you feel like you've been so disconnected from your body, it's really never too late. And I firmly believe that it's never, you can never get to a point where you can't make positive changes to kind of improve your confidence or your mental health. But it can feel like that, especially when you deal with mental health challenges. It can feel like, oh, it's already too late. I have X, Y, and Z injury. I just come from a, whatever dynamic that has caused me to have these habits. Not to say that it's easy, but I think the focus on creating that liminal space, and when I say liminal space, is like what I think of is like that in between space where we talk about the intuition, which channels and bleeds out into everything we do, not just like when we're, maybe thinking of working out, but like even when we're intuitively eating, feeling that nourishment go through your body and be absorbed and how your energy levels are after, that sort of thing, where we can try and incorporate intuition and creating space in all that we do and all how we move and how we are. And I think that's been my approach lately of, yeah, through all like arenas of my life is, maybe I plan to do something, but then when I get to the actual workout or movement or whatever it may be, it's not like intuitively like feeling right for me, and saying like it's okay to your brain wanting to plan out and have things in these perfect little boxes, but if it's not seasonally or energetically right, that's okay, that's more than okay. But unfortunately in our Western culture, we are taught, especially as women, that is not okay. Like if you're not correct, if you're not right the first time, that's not okay at all. If anything, you should be punished for that. And so that's where we feel a lot of that shame or maybe guilt, and that fear. I also love that you talk about like that physical barrier being in the womb space, creating fear. Because I think energetic blocks can be caused, yeah, definitely by having like physical barriers or, yeah, the things that we are ingesting into our body. And like you were mentioning that gut mind connection. But yeah, I think, yeah, everything you're saying is really resonating with me. I think what I would really, if I could talk to myself like 5 years ago when I was in college and kind of working through all these things, I think is um, not having like a specific idea of what I need to look like, or like basically that all of the things in my regimen that I have to absolutely do, um, to feel better and more confident in my body. And it's really beautiful when you think of it that way, because like when we approach it from a stance of from within side versus from all these externalities, we realize like we really have everything we need, and we always did. But that's not what we're taught, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's all you put all of that so beautifully. I'm just like, yes, yes, yes. um, but yeah, it's like, yeah, everything that you just said is so, beautiful and so like just, in alignment with, some of these different perceptions that we have, the mental health, the how we treat our bodies, how we treat our wombs. I was just thinking, I was like, there's literally so many like subtopics we can just take out of this conversation and have a whole like open up a whole other can of worms on, which I know we'll do. But it's to keep things on that. We've been on birth control, we've been on the mental health, being in our bodies, and ultimately, right, everything that you just kind of said is the coming into your own self empowerment, right, your own inner wisdom. And that's what I love to teach women about. I love to teach people in general about that. As much as I'm a women's health and wellness coach, I also work with men. I have a client right now that he's a weight loss client. He's an older gentleman and he just got diagnosed with prostate cancer. I work a lot with women's hormones, and I've done so much of my own hormones, but men need that too. Men have the same and similar issues. We have different set and a different approach to it, but it's just as important for them. And so when we're having these conversations about getting into the body, it's everybody has needs to get into their body, because everybody has something that is they're going through or is going on. Everyone has something there, right, for them to just dust off and shine up a bit, and to
Mhm.
figure out those things within themselves that maybe need some healing or maybe need a little more attention. And I love to educate and teach people and show them, different ways that they can do that. Even the way that I've done things, I teach that way, but I never expect that in a client or someone I'm working with, it's going to turn out exactly in the same pathway that I did. But
Yeah.
what I can do is give them the tools and, be their cheerleader as well and their coach to help them through that process, because it is scary and it is a lot. And, even like you were saying, if you could go back, you would tell yourself these things or try to change these things. I started journaling when I was a sophomore in college. So I have 4, almost 5 years of journals of just stories and things I was going through, like very, very in depth. I'm like, wow, I have a book right here. And one day I probably will publish a book, but I think it'll be like years and years down the road. But
Mhm.
um I go back sometimes and I read some of those entries, and it's really humbling sometimes because I read and I'm, oh, that didn't change. But, other times I go back and read and it's very, sentimental, and I get emotional because I'm like, wow, so much has changed. And I was really in a not great spot at that point. And, the things that I think of, the things that I would change or say to myself, right? Which in and of itself is very fulfilling in some ways, because it's like, wow, like me 4 years ago would have never thought that, I would be into these things now or thinking about health and wellness in this way now,
Mhm.
because I was so deep in my own suffering. One of the things I wanted to touch on as far as like the mental health conversation is, I just listened to this podcast on the Joe Rogan podcast where he was talking with Jordan B. Peterson. And I know a lot of people do not like Jordan B. Peterson, but I love him. He has a lot of really great points, and he has a very intellectual take on philosophy, right? And I think a lot of times people miss what he's actually saying, and they want to take offense right away to some of the things that he might say versus what's actually being said. But one of the things that
Mhm.
he talked about, and part of the podcast, was mental health. And I loved so much the way that he put it, because I was like, wow, I never thought to frame it that way. Is that, and I kind of touched on it earlier. And the reason I touched on it earlier was because I listened to that. And um, is that he said, people think, and the world has made us think that mental health is to be dealt with up here, like something's wrong and broken in your brain. And I just made a video on this too. I'm going to probably post it on sometime this week. But the world's made us think, hey, something's wrong and broken in your brain, right? So naturally the world thinks that your mental health needs to be fixed up here. Part of that is true, but what he then went on to say is, actually, mental health is all of the external factors of your life. And
Mhm.
the reason he said that was because he said it's the external factors of your life that affect the internal, and
Mhm.
that ultimately dictates your mental health. So when What I teach people how to do, whether it's in fitness or with nutrition and training, personal growth and development, is I help coach and teach people how to rebalance and reharmonize their lives, right? So that it alleviates suffering, so that their mental health gets better. And
Mhm.
a lot of times people don't think to look outside of themselves and their life in as a whole when they're thinking about their mental health. They just kind of chalk up like, oh, I have depression. Let me go see the doctor and take this pill and it'll be
Yeah.
fixed because it's going to fix the chemical that's in my brain.
Mhm.
But nothing actually changes in your life when you do that. So there's not anything actually getting better. And so, when our lives are out of balance or our lives are out of harmony, right? This could be in relationships, it could be in your career. Maybe you hate the job that you do. It could be with food, your relationship with food. It could be your relationship with money, your relationship with sex. It could be uh, your familial relationships, friendships, whether or not you have enjoyable activities, so hobbies in your life. Are you connected to your creativity, right? Are you connected to your self value and your emotions and your body? Like these are most of these things are all external, right? But when they're out of balance, most of the time people are suffering. If you have really poor relationships in your life, it's really hard to say, I have the best life ever, but all of my relationships really suck. And it's like, oh, it sounds like that hurts. And
Yeah.
there's definitely ways to make to make those situations better or make your relationships better. But whatever that rebalancing or reharmonizing looks like for you is ultimately what's going to make your mental health better, right?
Yeah.
However that looks, right? Because there's a million and one ways that could look. But it's the same thing with
Mhm.
food. It's like if you can't nourish your body, right, and enjoy the food that you eat, which you have to because you need to,
Yeah.
just to take care of yourself and be alive. It's like
Yeah.
that's another form of suffering. And so if that's out of balance, right, it's in turn going to affect your mental health, how you feel about yourself, how you perceive the world. And I think that his point of that was so spot on. I was like, wow, that's we really do think of mental health as this, it is internal, but we think it's internal up here to be fixed, right? Scientifically, when actually it's external to be fixed so that the internal feels good. And
Mm.
those are things that I think that in the mental health conversation, we're really, really, really missing the mark on that. Where it's like, are we looking, if we had an individual, like let's say we just had one individual and we're looking, they say, I have poor mental health, I have depression, I have anxiety, then the questions that I would then ask them would be, well, how's your relationship to yourself? Like, do you feel like you love yourself? If not, why? Or do you have hidden traumas in there? Are there things that have happened that you feel impact that? How do your relationships outside of your life look? How does that make you feel? How does your relationship with food look? How does that make you feel? And when you do that, you're addressing the whole human, right? Mind, body, emotions, and spirit. I come from my Native American and Mexican traditions, when we're talking about ancestral wisdom. And so everything that I teach and it comes from the Native American medicine wheel, because the medicine wheel in Native American tradition is a representation of our lives. And there's very core fundamental teachings in there that the medicine wheel is a circle, and the circle is complete. That's what makes us whole. So if we have any piece of that circle that's missing or out of balance or out of harmony, we ourselves are not, feeling our greatest. And that does impact mental health. And so the way that I like to frame that is very much from my ancestral teachings, but also, I put a philosophical and logical take on it from modern teachings and modern doctors that talk on these things. And it's to me, as long as the things, coincide, I find universal truth in that.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that. I love that you've taken. I have seen a lot of Jordan P. Peterson podcasts. I actually used to follow him kind of more so when I was like going down more of like a Christian route with my spirituality, which I'm like, wait, that could be a whole different conversation. I think I don't know if he's Christian or not, but yeah, he does have a lot of like really helpful approaches. I think especially for men. I've seen a lot of his videos
Mhm.
approach men's mental health, which I think is really, really an important conversation. And I love that you've brought that up of just how we as women have our womb space, but men have their own ways of intuition and things that fulfill them too. I think it's helpful to, like, I think when I used to watch Jordan B. Peterson, one thing I feel like I struggled with a lot of his concepts was it seemed to kind of put things on like a like male, female, masculine, feminine binary. And that's like I think when I used to watch his videos, I feel like I would really just feel like I'm always missing the mark on these certain things because he talks a lot about taking self accountability, which is really great. But I also love that you kind of talked about like we're bringing in our ancestral practices as well to kind of complement and supplement other like modern philosophical ways of thinking, and not taking something like so it's you know from a really like isolated perspective, which is what I feel like I was doing when I was first seeing Peterson's content. Because I was like, oh yeah, like the whole thing with like trad wife and just like a female is supposed to be like this and this thing, and I feel like there's a lot of themes around not him saying that specifically, but he does talk about those topics a lot. So I think I really appreciate though that he does talk about taking accountability, and having some real contemplation and brutally honest reflection about your health and the things that you may or may not be addressing, because there is a slippery slope when it comes to spiritual work, because I think that a lot of the times spiritual conversations can tend to lead down almost like I guess a validation of certain behaviors that may not necessarily be like helpful, or healing, and it can kind of be like, well, yes, we definitely want to be spiritually in tune and create space for our practices, but then also I think it's definitely having the ability to have accountability and be brutally honest with oneself about where we may also have room to like improve or grow in. So I like that you're putting it on like a very holistic scale of like it's not just about like doing these certain things and being super harsh on yourself. It's also about your quality of life and looking at how do you actually feel with your relationship with yourself, because we can eat really healthily, we can work out, and we can take accountability, and we could even be in a relationship or have like a lot of friends. But when we look at the actual quality and the substance of those different habits, that really matters when we talk about our longevity and our overall sustainability, and how we like truly enjoy or don't enjoy our lives. So I really like that, and I think I'm interested to learn more about ancestral practices. I'm just reading a book now, and I'm working with also like a she's like a I guess she's a therapist that talks a lot about just shifting kind of the Western mindset and incorporating more of our indigenous practices. And one thing she said that um, I remember when you're speaking is how when you're watching that podcast, talking about how we're trying to solve our mental health issues just from our analytical mind. She said that something when I first met her, she was talking about basically we've created these tools from a place that's already traumatized. So how effective can the tools be? Because our mindset in creating those were already from a limited kind of constrained place. And I thought that made so much sense. And so she's talking about how we can kind of radicalize our way of thinking so that it's not necessarily you have a problem, you try to think about it and solve your way out of it. It's getting into the body and in other practices and rituals that we may have, that help us to like approach those challenges more holistically. But yeah, it's such a nuance and complex conversation. I think there's this line between, when we talk about mental health, it's like, well, you can't expect yourself to feel good if you know you're making choices that are not in alignment with what helps you to feel better. But then it's also hard because someone who's having a mental health crisis, a lot of the times they're not going to want to be like, obviously, they don't want to be told certain things, or they don't want to. It's just very painful to hear certain things or realize certain things. And when we talked about the womb space earlier, and you were describing how like it's not that you weren't aware necessarily of some of the things that may have happened or that you're healing from. It's just that it was so difficult, painful, tense, tight, maybe to get into that. Why would someone want to make these changes? And sometimes, yeah, it's as simple as like, I just want to feel better, look better, be more confident. But I think it can be difficult because we know that when we set goals, um, right away we might feel super excited about them and really motivated and like super, looking forward to it. But then like when it comes to doing the dirty work of working towards it, we realize, oh, I actually have to make these sacrifices. I actually have to be accountable for my actions and what I'm doing on the day to day. And it doesn't have to be like a super like self disciplinary thing where it's like you're super shameful of like when you don't do it exactly the way that you want it to. But I think it's like just prioritizing being mindful in those moments and then giving yourself grace as needed. For me, it's like, okay, let me step back and realize what are certain things I've been doing in the past weeks or months, even that could contribute to maybe how I'm feeling right now or the thing I'm struggling with. And I like that you've broken it down into a lot of external factors that aren't addressed from our analytical mind, but are addressed from within inside. How the balance or imbalance of those certain factors can affect our confidence and our ability to see things clearly. But yeah, I think just getting started for a lot of people can be really like getting into the womb space, especially with a lot of the trauma and the just really like heavy things that can come up for people. I know certainly for myself, I would really say that my spiritual path has only really kind of, I mean, I would say since COVID, since everything that happened since COVID really like I think forced myself along with a lot of people to like really contemplate on like their life and what they want to do, their health, their wellness. But I would say realistically only in the past, especially year for me, has been when I have really taken it seriously to step back and look at like some of my habits that I want to work on or the things that I want to prioritize with just like womb health and being in sync with my cycles and hormones and like learning and just getting excited about feeling better and working towards like having more of a holistic approach to my health. So I think that's what it was for me is like definitely getting the courage to like go into that place, but then also like the excitedness. Like we're talking about like, well, do you enjoy the things in your life? Like what are certain things that can help you to look forward to waking up every day and working on something? And that's a feeling that I think for a lot of people who have mental health challenges is very lacking, especially with people who deal with depression, because that's like you wake up and you're like, I want to go back to bed. Like, there's nothing that I'm looking forward to. So I think talking about this in like a very exciting and learning, growing journey is really helpful for people to like realize, I guess you may start from any point in your journey to take these things seriously. And I think leaning into the community for sure of like getting that additional support from elders and just different people that we feel safe with to seek that support and kind of reflect on our journey back and forth with. But yeah, a lot of people with mental health challenges, I think they don't have the support systems and they don't even know where to begin with these certain factors. So I'd be curious what your take is on, say, someone who feels like super, super low in their life, they're having different maybe health challenges. and they have no idea which bucket to start with, or how to like start those healthier habits and really take a serious look at like how they're feeling about themselves. Like what would you say is kind of like the, I don't like to generalize, but maybe like the kind of like at a baseline, what are the things that you would recommend them to do?
So, very first thing, first and foremost, is always the movement. Like, do some form of movement. I don't
Yeah.
care if walking outside for 10 minutes. I don't care if it's like you lift some dumbbells for 5, like do some sort of movement, have a routine with it,
Mhm.
start walking, because movement exercise in and of itself, scientifically already, we know that it helps to release endorphins into your body. It helps to
Yeah.
release the neurotransmitters into your body that make you feel good. So doing that just in and of itself, you're it's going to help your mental health in some way, shape, or form. And then you're obviously taking care of your body, so that solves a huge problem in and of itself. So I
Yeah.
always tell people, just move. The type of movement that you do doesn't have to look like CrossFit or hit cardio or whatever. Like,
Uh-huh.
just do something or find something, right? If you're even curious about something, trying something, go try it, go do it.
Mhm.
you know I always tell people, it's like the what's really hard, with again, the fitness industry, the exercise, is it's very intimidating. There's a lot of the average person is usually very intimidated by getting into some form of fitness or exercise because they don't
Mhm.
know about fitness or exercise, and it's okay, right?
Yeah.
But to be able to step, I love that you mentioned just having courage, right? And intention is
Mhm.
one. If you want, people talk about motivation when it comes to starting something. Don't lean into motivation, because motivation has is typically driven by external factors, right? um and when it's internal, like sometimes we experience things like burnout, or we try to set a goal and we're motivated towards the goal, and that perhaps is internal. But the thing about goals is that they end, and it doesn't they don't always promote a long-term trajectory. When you set intentions, right? Intentions, anything and everything that happens is around that intention, and they can be long term, right? So even during New Year's, I don't set resolutions or goals anymore. I set intentions, because the rest of my year has to do with those intentions that I set, and every single year it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and they change my life. Every
Yeah.
single year my life changes drastically. And
Mhm.
so be intentional and have courage to pursue the things that you uh, want to do, right? But be courageous in setting your intention, whatever that is, to make that change in your life. And when you do that, you're gonna have a little bit of an easier time being able to see it through and
Yeah.
hold yourself accountable to that intention. Uh, and you'll know, right, when you're not. You'll know when you're not in integrity with that thing, because you feel it.
Yeah.
But again, the exercise is a really just that's my number one always, is like, I people just got to move their bodies, like they got to sweat, they got to get that blood pumping, because you're doing so much for your body just doing that.
Mhm.
That I would say, like, there's just so many avenues that you can take with movement and exercise, that there's almost no excuse not to, right? Even if you're someone that is intimidated by the gym, or going into a group class training, whatever it is, that there's no excuse, because you could go walk outside.
True.
You could go walk outside, you could walk in your backyard, you can do home workouts. Like, there's just so many options. Doesn't even have to be workouts. You can go, like you said, do yoga, you can do tai chi,
Mm.
jujitsu, go take a kickboxing class, something that requires work, and requires sweating. The other things I would say, if you can get access to them, are sauna and ice baths. They have a lot of really great benefits. If you're someone that can't do a whole lot of physical, like cardio or exercise, saunas are great. You get, I believe it's up to 40% of your same aerobic capacity just sitting in a sauna for 20 minutes as you do doing 30 minutes of aerobic exercise or cardio. And
Oh.
so those, those are things that there's different places and, gyms that have them now, but even implementing something like that um, is really beneficial.
Hmm.
uh, Ice baths, I know there's a bunch of different places now too that have those, or they do cold plunges. And those, they both, sauna and ice baths, they're extremes. They both release the neurotransmitters, the serotonin, the dopamine into your brain, into your body. So you're gonna feel good in general doing either of those things. Um, yeah, and obviously, though I touched on the meditation, the breathing. Um, there's lots of videos and breathing routines on YouTube and online, so it's like I feel so easy to go and look them up. But obviously, I would say come to me because I will teach you. I'll teach you, different kinds of breathing routines that are very simple, very baseline, and really all they're meant to do is help you get into a parasympathetic nervous system, help you relax, de-stress. I Even with meditation, I don't push it onto anyone that doesn't want to do that, or maybe it's not for them, and that's totally okay. But getting the exercise, getting the nutrition, doing different little health practices like the sauna and the ice baths are incredibly beneficial, and anyone can do those three things alone, so and should, just for taking care of their health. So those are my like basic, like where people should start.
Hmm.
um, and I it's again, it's these things are things that you can do on your own. It's just really setting the intention and having the courage to see them through, right? When it comes to, I know you kind of touched on like, oh, well, sometimes I don't want to, I get in that mindset, I don't want to do something. Those are the other parts of things where I tell people, if you have a really hard time sticking with your integrity to something, or um, you don't finish projects, that's where we get into the personal development stuff. And I would tell people like, hey, maybe find a coach that does personal development, because those are things that do impact your life, and if it's getting in the way of you taking care of your health, that's number one, right? If you don't
True.
have your health, you don't have anything. You can't do anything if you don't have your health, right?
Mhm.
Anytime I've been injured or I've been super sick, it's just like the worst thing ever. It's like, man, if my body is not at 100% and healthy, I can't actually do all the things that, I want with my day, or, just the things that I'm trying to achieve. So, you
Yeah.
know, um, being able to take care of your health is number one. And if you have a hard time doing that, it's like find a trainer, find a coach, find, someone that can help keep you accountable, even if it's a friend, find a
Mhm.
gym, help them, like have them help you keep accountable.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are my baseline, you know,
Yeah.
my baseline ones. And man, I've loved this whole conversation. It's been so good. So thanks for having me and doing this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and your tips. And it's great to end off with, like, if someone ends up seeing this who is feeling kind of discouraged in their journey and not knowing where to start with womb wellness. I'm really, really grateful to have you on this platform, and I hope we can do future ones. Can you share where people can find you if they stumble upon this live, your Instagram or any other like platform you want to share?
Yes. So my Instagram is at serenefit.opt. And that is where I share most of my content when it comes to women's health and wellness. I share some fitness content on there. Sometimes I'm sharing some herbal tea mixtures on there, or infusions on there that are just helpful for the body. Occasional nutrition stuff in there. I love to try to hit as many points as I can, as I'm also niching down a little bit. But you can find me primarily on Instagram. You can also find me on TikTok. Right now, it's at Blossom with Serene on TikTok. Soon to be at Serene Fit as well. .opt.
Perfect.
So yeah, and If anyone that sees this is interested in coaching or taking a personal development program that touches on all of these areas that we just discussed through this whole live, I have a 16-week course called Fertile Grounds that I've created, health, womb care, and empowerment for women. So I'm throwing that out there because I would love to work with anyone that is interested in healing that part of themselves and learning more about that part of themselves, and just taking a little deeper look into some self-awareness practices and how to create a harmonious and balanced life with full self-empowerment. So
Yes. I love it so much. Thank you for sharing all of your information and your handles. And yes, definitely go check her out. She has lots of resources on her page, especially looking for like fitness, like inspiration and ideas and just things to get you excited about taking care of yourself. Definitely check her out. I'll put everything in like the description of this video as well. But yeah, thank you again for coming on the first live on my channel, and hopefully we'll do another one soon.
yes, all right, thanks, Bethany.
Talk to you soon.
Talk soon.